I ask for your indulgence with this presumption to send you this, but I had a chance to talk to James just a few minutes ago, and I just wanted to offer the board a couple of comments that from the experience here in Newtown and other places. The first is just a personal comment that you will not be the same person when this is all over. That is gone. That doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can be a new and wonderful thing, potentially. Out of this horror can come something wonderful. Tragic, but wonderful. When the tragedy happened here in Newtown, it was a very civil community. In many ways, it's maybe a rural version of Highland Park, very similar socioeconomic organization, demographics, very similar. When the tragedy happened, and we came to call it the tragedy, it was the event for some time, and basically people refer to it now as the tragedy. When it happened, it felt as if all of the artifice of our external lives was just shorn from us. Every bit of sense of who we are in our positions or our titles, our religious communities, our political affiliations, none of that mattered. None of that counted. It was all ripped from us. And all of us were in the same position. We were all in the position of this raw, anguished vulnerability. And that's quite a place to be. It's not anything you'd wish on anyone. And describing it to someone who hasn't experienced it is no easy task. It's basically impossible. But from that place, something very fundamental about our humanity was mobilized. And there was a sense that we must build on the best of each other. We must be there for each other. We must find ways to serve each other and the best of each other. That's the lesson. That's what the arts community can do, maybe like no other force in the community. The religious communities, if they have their acts together, can speak to that well. In Newtown, they were able to. But it really is the arts community who can find means of expressing this sense of transformation, tikkun olam, to repair the world, to repair the sense of hope in a humanity that could produce a horror like this. To see our two natures, that we've got this insane, monstrous side of us, but we have something else that's very refined and noble. And it really is the job of the arts now to state that very clearly. The other point I wanted to just make briefly is the long haul. What we did in New York City, what we've done in Newtown and other places, is pepper the community with as many people as possible trained in ways to expand the way we view each other. Because suffering has the tendency to pull us inwards and make us more tribal, to make us more insular, to make us more, protective. So we see harm where there isn't, or we see something to blame when it's not blameworthy. We see an attack or an insult when there isn't one. We're either more defensive or more offensive. That would be a tragic outcome of this. If the social fabric were weakened because that part of the trauma was not tended to. As a psychiatrist, I know how the traditional model works with working individually, maybe with families and dealing with symptoms. But this wound is much bigger and much more pervasive than just what happens to individuals and the production of symptoms. Some very fundamental issues have to be addressed. How do we reconstruct a sense of hope in a world or in humanity when this kind of event can happen? This is a deep wound that has to be addressed, and the arts are the way to examine that, to pursue that question. And if there's no goal to reach for that's worthwhile, then what is there that mobilizes any of the noble qualities in me? Why would I want to look for anything noble in myself? Right? That could then reach that goal. And the thing that connects those two is our motivation, our sense of a goal and our sense of who we are, our own capacity. If we mobilize those in a noble way, motivation can be rekindled. But motivation towards building something better and new and bigger. And out of all of this, community can be reformed in a way that's not based on despair or tribal identities, smaller identities. This is the thing that has to be resisted in the long haul. How does Highland Park become bigger and more inclusive and more dynamic in its diversity and celebrating its unity in that diversity? Because the benefits of it become obvious. This is what I would call successful suffering. Unsuccessful suffering would be being overwhelmed by despair and paralysis and isolation and defeat. Successful suffering would be finding that humble place, that raw, vulnerable place of hurt that sees in that suffering the suffering of others, and then can join with others in compassion and mobilize with others to care for each other. This is what generates true civilization. The final thing would be to say that there are wounded healers amongst you. That in the idea of suffering successfully is this notion of a wound and a healer. The best teachers, the best artists, the best parents, the best friends, the best doctors, the best nurses are wounded healers. They're people who found a way to take their pain, their suffering, and turn it into compassionate care for others. Again, there's no better forum, there's no better venue, there's no better mobilizer for these principles than the arts. There's ways to do that. There's ways to do it at a community level. There's ways to do it in a neighborhood. There's ways to do it in organizations. But the long view of this is, again, not just managing this time now, but looking towards how to steer this traumatic process into a transformative process. There's many other things I'd share with you, friends, but I apologize for intruding on you like this. But I wanted to give you some sense of hope, and I couldn't be prouder to be a part of the Newtown community and the dear, dear friends that we have here. And this notion of grief as being a form of love, and that don't be afraid of the grief, don't be afraid of the tears, don't be afraid of the heartbreak. These are all signs of love. They're emblems of love. So focus on the love, not on the tears. Let the tears come. Let the grieving come. Grieve with people you love. Grief isn't a disease you need to get over in 2 weeks. It'd be like saying, how do you get over love in 2 weeks? You don't get over grief. You find a new form for the love to take. Again, perfect platform for the arts. Thank you, friends. If there's any way I can be of help to you, I'm more than willing to do that. And I wish you all the best in your work.